Right now, students opposed to war are being shot with rubber bullets on American campuses. A former president is in contempt of court and also boasting about how he wants to make America great, as in a great totalitarian state. War, famine, pestilence are all upon us. And this month, I can close my eyes to it all because this is May and gardening is possible again. I am here on the Brink with two of the best gardeners in the Capital District of New York, which is not the easiest place to grow fruit, flowers, or vegetables. Barbara Nuffer was the Master Gardener of the Year in Rensselaer County for last year. She has worked in conservation with the state. She did that for years, and she's still working at conservation now, only it's in her backyard. And we're also lucky to have Judith Federle. She is a legendary Master Gardener in Albany County. She's a literary scholar, a former distinguished professor at UAlbany, and a trained garden designer. Both of these women not only garden, get their hands in the dirt, but they write about it, and beautifully. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here. And as I say, I'm going to try not to gush like a fangirl during this, but you're my models for gardening. Let's start with this question. Do you believe in green thumbs or the opposite, black thumbs? Are great gardeners born rather than trained? Barbara, let's start with you.
What a great question. And I get this all the time. In fact, I was at my orthopedic surgeon and she was asking me about gardening with children, and she said she had a black thumb. So I tried to explain to her that if you have the right light and you have the right water and you have the right pH, the right plant in the right place, anybody can garden. Some of us have a passion for it and we can't help ourselves. We have to constantly try new plants and push the limits. And we have failures. We're no different than the average person, but give it a try.
That still sounds like a lot. Light and pH. What's pH? All that. What do you think, Judith? Are great gardeners born or are they made?
I think everybody has the capacity to garden. I think people who say that often are talking to someone whom they think of as this incredible gardener. And just like Barbara said, they don't recognize that we kill plants on a regular basis. I mean, if I look at my list, I have a complete list of all the plants that I've ever planted in this garden. And I started a list of plants that have died, but I gave up after a while. It got to be too big and too embarrassing. But I think, I always say to people, it's a matter of desire and perseverance. That anybody can be a gardener who wants to be a gardener. There are certain things, like Barbara said, there are certain basics, but like right plant, right place. But honestly, it's more the attitude, it's more the conviction, it's more the desire, and everybody can be a gardener. And it's a wonderful thing to be. It is a spiritually renewing, intellectually challenging, physically motivating activity. It's wonderful.
It's way better than real exercise, like playing a game or running. I have to say, I go out in the garden, I pull up weeds, I give the weeds names of people I don't like and then rip them out by the roots. I don't know, it's very better than therapy. A lot of people did try gardening during the years of the pandemic. There was nothing else to do, and going outside, you didn't have to always wear a mask. So gardening got popular then, a lot. And now there's still a lot of inexperience, but sort of enthusiastic gardeners out there. I see a change. I want to ask both of you what advice you have for beginning gardeners, people who have done it not longer than, say, 2020. Judith, how about you first?
Well, it depends on what they want to do. I mean, I always start with anybody who comes to me to talk about gardening. I always start with the question, well, what is it you want to do? Do you want to grow vegetables? Do you want to grow perennials? Do you want to grow shrubs? And what kind of effect and experience are you looking for? Small garden that you can manage, a large garden, mostly trees? Are you wanting to do native gardening? Do you want to join the amazing movement to restore ecologically, environmentally appropriate habitat in the Northeast? It's just, you have to start with a lot of questions. So you help the person get clear about what it is they want to do. and then they're likely to have a lot more success in doing it.
Yeah, that's we're going to talk more about the ecologically important role of gardening in a minute, but want to get back to this beginner. And many of those questions, they don't have an idea. It's like, oh, I just want something small, tomatoes and salad, but there's advice to be given, is there not, about like, don't start with fruit trees, for example. They're hard.
No, actually,
I can't, fruit trees. Oh my goodness, I have no luck.
Depending on the fruit tree, pear trees are incredibly.
Oh, okay. The Bartlett ones are just like invasive. They grow themselves. They're horrible.
They're not invasive, but they are very easy to grow. So it really depends. I mean, everything has to be tailored to the person who is, and usually, as you say, people think they want a garden, but the subject is so huge and they haven't really figured out what experience they want to get from this. And that you have to start with that. What is it that you want to have? Are you looking to grow vegetables so you can feel you participate in making your own food? Do you want something that's really aesthetically beautiful so you can sit on your patio and enjoy a garden? Are you wanting to restore native habitat? I mean, those are the questions that really are important to ask people.
And Barbara, how about you? You get asked this a lot. You're a master gardener as well.
I used to also do garden design for people. And the first question I would ask was, do you want to have a garden or do you want to be a gardener? Because you can have somebody put in a garden for you and maintain that for you, and it'll be a pleasurable experience. But if you're someone who actually wants to get your hands dirty, that's a different experience. And there are some very reputable garden centers with very knowledgeable staff. And if you went in and explained to them, I have a south-facing slope, it's got really good soil, and I like to be in the garden maybe later in the day. You sort of give the person what you're looking for. They can make recommendations on plants. And I think that's a really good way to start. And I even told people, if you're in a new property, watch it for a year. But another way to do it is to go to the garden center every week and see what's in bloom and see what really turns you on. I mean, I always said, if having a row of marigolds is your ideal garden, then go for it. If you want to have every single tiny perennial polka dot garden, you're going to be working. So it really helps to speak to some of the knowledgeable people at some of the bigger reputable gardens. And we have several that are just fabulous.
Okay, we'll do a commercial later on this. I've been thinking about my first garden. It was your little row of marigolds that did that, and it was a bunch of nasturtia, which are beautiful little flowers. I was living in a small apartment in a sketchy neighborhood. I had a little patch of dirt outside the door, and I put in nasturtia, and they were amazing. And I got such pleasure from people going by and saying, "Oh, that's so pretty. It's so nice of you to do that." Until they got totally trampled by a bunch of kids who delighted. And I know, I'm reminded of that because at the Colony Public Library, there's a little garden outside, a reading garden. And the same thing happened as a group of volunteers who go up and weed and kind of plant. And we had our first casualty, a plant just ripped up by the roots and, shredded on the sidewalk. Like, why? Why do people do that? So beautiful. What do you think? Have you had any trouble with that? You've worked in a lot of gardens, Judith.
Luckily, no. We have not had any vandalism. Well, we did have some people take some vegetables out at the Cornell Cooperative Extension Gardens. We had a couple that came regularly.
They shopped in the gardens,
helped themselves to vegetables in the garden, but we posted some signs, and I think maybe Carol talked to them and said that we were growing these for food pantries, and so we would appreciate it if they didn't use them. But no, in fact, I have to say, Rosemary, I am amazed at how little vandalism takes place in Washington Park Garden with the tulips.
The tulips, that's a good point. That's a good point.
The number of tulips, the temptation that represents to someone who wants to destroy something beautiful, to trample on it, to rip them out, to cut them to shreds. I used to live in downtown Albany, right across from Washington Park. And in the 20 years I lived there, I think there was 1 year and 1 year only when a small area, just a small area of the whole gardens was vandalized. I think that's extraordinary.
Yeah, that is amazing. There's something about beauty that makes everyone smile. Outside of my front lawn, which you saw it, Barbara, it's a mess, but I'm trying to turn what was a destroyed lawn into kind of a rock garden. And people stop all the time walking their dogs or just riding their bikes to tell me that they like this flower or that flower. I love that. There's a social thing to gardening, isn't there, Barbara?
Absolutely. The other thing I was going to mention to new gardeners is local garden clubs have plant sales. And that tells you the plants that do really well in this area. And some of them you can get fairly inexpensively. You just have to be aware of what we call the thugs, which are the plants that are just going to take over your whole garden.
Oh, yeah.
But I agree. You know, where I grew up on Long Island, we were on the corner house, and my mother had a gorgeous little rock garden, and people would just come over all the time, and it was tiny, just to admire it. It really was a wonderful thing.
Yeah, and people do definitely respond to it. There's just something there that's primal, but I don't know.
Rosemary, let me put in my first of many plugs. To go visit the Cornell Cooperative Extension in Voorheesville, we have 22 demonstration gardens there. When you mentioned, Barbara, you know, learning about or seeing plants that will do well in our zone and climate, that is an excellent way. Everything is marked, plants are marked. There's different kinds of gardens to imagine. We have an incredible shade garden so people can get ideas, but it is really important. The other thing that's really important is we have a shrub garden, which will show people what shrubs become at their maturity, because so many people take a shrub and have no clue how big it's going to get, and then that leads to a sad end.
Yeah, shade where you don't want it, space taken up. It is definitely a mess. Okay, all right, now because I'm a journalist, I want to just go right to the bad news. So what is the worst mistake you made as a gardener and as experimenting? A plant that went wild. I mean, the worst thing that happens is a dead plant, but it's not the worst. You can have invasions, lots of things. Let me throw it out to you. Barbara, worst mistake you ever made in all your years of experimenting?
Okay, my father-in-law was a Cornell Cooperative Extension agricultural agent in Washington County, and we moved into a house with a slope, and he recommended we plant crown vetch.
Oh. Yeah.
Well, you can imagine the crown vetch has gone under the driveway. It is everywhere. So, you know, it may be good for like along a highway in Pennsylvania or something, but it is very difficult. And the other thing was when I was teaching at a girls' school in the area, I love the violets in the lawn. So I dug some of those and put them in the lawn, and I love them, but they drive my husband nuts. So he grew up with a very green, proper lawn, you know, and I feel like if it's green and it has a flower in it, that's a bonus.
I'm going to come back to you in a minute, Judith, but I have a follow-up question here for Barbara, which is, what's your favorite weed that you don't kill? Right now, I have in my garden a fantastically beautiful garlic mustard plant, which I know is a weed, and I'm going to pull it out before it goes to seed. Don't worry, but it's beautiful. It's beautiful. How can this be a weed? Oh, they're shaking their heads. I wish you could see this.
Have to get rid of it.
Oh boy.
I will. I'm going to pull it.
Nasty invasive. Get rid of it. Ooh. We pull it out wherever we see it.
I let the dandelions grow too. I love dandelions. And my grandfather used to come to our garden, our lawn, and dig them out and make salads out of them. I have trouble digging out dandelions too.
Yeah.
Bad gardener. Bad.
No, because dandelion is the first flower for the bees, the pollinators. So
it is.
You definitely, you know, if you want to do the no mow May, you leave your dandelions.
So you're a purist, Judith. You just pull out all the weeds. If they're in the weed book, out they go.
Oh, God, no. I leave the dandelion. Well, I have to fight with my partner. She wants to dig them up, but luckily she doesn't get to all of them. But I would like to leave the dandelions. I leave the violets. I'm leaving the creeping Charlie.
I love creeping Charlie. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not putting any chemicals on my lawn ever again.
Yep.
So I'm paying the price. I don't have a nice, clean, nice, lush green. I mean, it's lush, but it's not necessarily your non-native European turf grass lush.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but no, I definitely leave the dandelions and other early pollinators.
Yes. Okay. So there's my little plug for some weeds. We're going to talk more about lawns in a minute with some master gardeners. We have to take a break right now. We'll be right back. Please listen to On the Brink on Apple, YouTube, Google, Spotify. Oh, go ahead and think of some other podcast platform that you like. We're there too. You can help us to attract more sponsors and thus more high quality programming by liking us, rating us, in general, by engaging with us on social media. Even call us if you want. This will not cost you anything except a few minutes of your time, and it will make a difference. Segments of On the Brink can be heard weekly on the Hudson Mohawk Magazine, a feature of WOOC Radio, that's 105.3 FM. This magazine is a volunteer-produced local news hour that airs discussions and debates about topics that affect our world. We are proud to be sponsored by the Sales Award-winning Donna Frank team of luxury property specialists at Berkshire Hathaway Blake Realtors. Donna is a very old and good friend from my WAMC days, and I can vouch for her skill, energy, and real estate expertise. Check out the Donna Frank team on Facebook, or you can contact her at this email, donnafed, DONAFED, @gmail.com. You will be happy that you did. Welcome back to On the Brink. We're here with Judith Federle and Barbara Nuffer, who are outstanding and expert gardeners, but they like teaching others who are not so expert. And we're going to hear a lot more about their ideas and their plans. I want to talk about grass. How the heck did this become the favorite plant of America? Why not dandelions, a whole yellow lawn instead of green grass? Grass it's boring. It doesn't do anything for bees, and yet we cultivate it. We throw poison on it to kill everything else, so it thrives. How did this happen, Judith?
Well, no, the current situation, the suburban lawn is a relatively recent development. If you go back and look at gardening books from the 1800s, what they talk about grasses as kind of multiple species of native plants that form a lawn. So this is a relatively new development, and I think it has a lot to do with the way in which the American dream has become connected to the home, the self-standing home, even though vast percentage of our population lives in cities. If you think about what is the American dream, how do you know you've achieved the American dream? You have a home, a freestanding home with a nice front lawn, and the front lawns of the whole neighborhood connect, giving you the kind of illusion of community. They almost replace the old-fashioned commons that used to be in the middle of towns, which we don't have anymore, but they are a sign of community. They are a sign of success. And honestly, I campaign against excessive lawns, but I'm not kill all the lawns fan at all. I think lawns have much to recommend them. I mean, they're actually, those non-native European turf grasses are quite beautiful as plants if you ever get down and actually look at them individually. And the lawns, especially the backyards, work to provide play spaces, barbecue spaces, all kinds of other spaces. The thing is, we don't need as much of it. We have way more lawn than we need. And part of the reason for that is because people don't have to maintain their own lawns. They just hire it out. Somebody else comes, usually somebody who knows nothing about plants. They come at 8 o'clock in the morning, even though it's a terrible time to cut the lawn. They come every week, even though the lawn doesn't need it, and they slash the lawn to shreds. Then the grass doesn't grow, so they have to come and pour poisons on it, to get the grass to grow. It's a terrible, terrible situation, and absolutely at the top of my list of things that should change. But that's why I call my talk "Shrink the Lawn."
Right, not eliminate
Get
it.
rid of it entirely.
Okay, why is 8 o'clock in the morning a terrible time to cut grass? I did not know this.
Yeah, well, it's not dried off. The grass has to have time to dry off, and you don't want to be cutting it wet. It just mats and tangles, and it doesn't get a clean cut. It's bad for the grass. It doesn't recover as well. You definitely want to wait. Best time is in the late afternoon.
Aha. And how about you, Barbara? You don't have much lawn. I've been to your house. You prefer gardens.
No,
Did it have a lawn when you first got there?
Well, when we first got here, the house was built into a hill, and there really wasn't much of anything. So we've been adding material to create what at first was a lawn, and then slowly, as I got into gardening, I kept saying to my husband, "Do you think we can make that bed a little bigger and eliminate more lawn?" And he's like, "You bet." But the other bad thing you didn't mention, Rosemary, about lawns is the combustion engine. All that fossil fuel. I mean, you can have electric mowers, but they're smelly and it's just horrible. But I do think a beautiful lawn can accent a garden. And it is a nice place, if you want to play croquet or you want the kids to have a little place to play. But I don't think it should be the majority of the property. If you look at the houses in England, when you pull up, it's gravel. There's no lawn. All the garden is behind the house.
Right.
It's a completely different concept, and I love that.
Mm-hmm.
But
you can tell that both of my guests, Judith Federle and Barbara Nuffer, not only are great gardeners but have designed gardens. So you've taken a look at how lawns and flower beds interact, which is what we're really talking about now. There is a movement to help the ecology, which we know is failing, to help pollinators, to help birds by shrinking lawns, or by pulling up some of your lawn and replacing it with basically flowers. I love Rebecca McMacklin, if I'm saying her name right. She's the horticulturist who is responsible for the Brooklyn Bridge Park in New York City, an amazing one. She gives TED Talks if anybody's interested. And she talks about how a lot of damage to the environment has been done in the name of gardening, because we put in plants that are not, nurseries don't even sell a lot of native plants. They're beginning to, but they don't. We put in exotics. We've used chemicals to keep them. So for the sake of a garden, we're hurting the environment when all we really need to do is just plant more native flowers and plants. Can you both talk about that a little? I know you both know a lot about it. Start with Barbara.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue with putting in native plants is you have to respect the pH of your soil. I know that sounds technical and fancy, but in our area, most of the native plants like an acidic soil. They're growing in an evergreen forest. I do believe in the Helderbergs that the pH is a little bit higher, but in general, so if you are going to introduce natives, they're not as easy as, you have to do a little bit of research into what their requirements are. But the wonderful thing about them is they bloom and they fruit when the native wildlife needs them to. I realized that when I saw my garden had so many magnolias and things that were not, they were from Japan. And I'm thinking, no wonder, it really would be nice to have a winterberry type of holly that's native. And then the birds just love it. You won't believe the birds you get in the winter that come to that bush. So it really is tied to the native, the birds, the animals, and also shelter. So you might not want to do fussy little native plants. You might want to do more native shrubs that flower and then form fruit. But start with the soil. It always starts with the soil.
It's easy to find the pH of your soil. You can bring it to the center in Voorheesville that Judith has been talking about. And you probably have something similar in the Troy area, Barbara, where bring in a little 2 cups of dirt in a plastic bag, dried out, and they put some chemicals in, and it can tell you very quickly what your pH is and how to amend it to make it more or less acidic. So it's not hard at all. It's one of those things that gardeners make it look hard, but it really isn't, I think. Tell us more about native plants and how they're not just great for the environment. They are, and birds and bees love them, and butterflies. That changes your garden. But they're also just pretty in themselves. They're completely set for this environment, and they come in all different colors and shapes. Can you tell us about some, Judith?
Yeah, let me just add to the soil testing thing that there actually is a technique to testing the soil. And so anybody who is interested in doing a soil test through CCE should call and get the instructions, because it has to be taken up in a certain way and handled in a certain way before we can give you any kind of valuable information about your soil test. But absolutely, that's a good thing to do. And the other thing I would say about natives before I'm going to refer to something important here, but before I forget, the other thing about natives is they don't need the water.
Important.
We use so much unnecessary water to keep the exotic plants alive because they're not from this climate, and so they don't handle the conditions that we have here very well. And we're spending a lot of time watering plants that if we had more native plants, we wouldn't need to maintain them so much. We wouldn't need to have so many what they call in the industry inputs into maintaining. So it's always a question of inputs and outputs. And that's very much the case with lawn care. I mean, Barbara mentioned the horrible outputs of the carbon that's spewed by these lawnmowers. But I want to read, I'm sure you're aware of this, Rosemary, but I just want to put in a plug for Doug Tallamy's wonderful concept of homegrown national park. Are you familiar?
Yep. And very familiar. I love him. Yes. I have an oak tree in my backyard because of Doug Tallamy.
Yes. Yes. Well, can I just read what he says? Because I think if the people who are listening actually hear this, this is Doug Tallamy, and his topic is what he calls homegrown national park. And he writes, what if each American landowner made it a goal to convert half of his or her lawn to productive native plant communities? Even moderate success could collectively restore some semblance of ecosystem function to more than 20 million acres of what is now ecological wasteland. If we restore the ecosystem function of these 20 million acres, we can create this country's largest park.
Amazing.
I just think I love Doug Tallamy because he is so positive. And he comes up with an idea that is so possible to do. Not take out all your lawn. He's not saying take out all the lawn. He's just talking about taking out half. And he's pointing out how many millions of acres in this country are devoted to what we call a lawn, which we have to remember. And I always say this to remind people, they are non-native European turf grasses. So it's really, really important to, and we're doing this because there are so many threats to our local ecosystem. We're losing a lot of the insects. We're losing a lot of the birds. The birds need caterpillars. The caterpillars need trees they can feed on. That's why Doug Tallamy loves the oaks, because the oaks support the largest number of caterpillars. That means food for birds. And he's got in his this marvelous chart of how many caterpillars it takes
exactly
keep a nest of a certain kind of bird alive from birth to breeding to flying. So it's quite a marvelous book, and I strongly recommend it. Nature's Best Hope is the name of it. And I think it'll change the way you think about everything. But anyway, native plants, the point of native plants is to restore the native ecosystem in order to keep our insects and birds and our whole native population functioning. Because the truth of the matter is we're eliminating things at a
So quickly. Yeah, furious rate.
No idea what these things really do. We're just eliminating without any knowledge of what it is we're losing every time we lose a beetle or a moth or an insect of any sort. And that's the sad thing.
There's quite a lot of talk about the insect apocalypse going on, the number of and the species of insects that have died out in just our lifetime.
Yes.
Is scary, and it does affect everything from bees to butterflies to us.
Oh.
I want to emphasize again that this is not really advanced level stuff that to help the environment, to be part of this national park. I put an oak sapling in my backyard, and that is helping. And I let some milkweed grow in a garden without pulling it up. I have monarch butterflies last year. All I did was just let the weeds grow, and I have monarch butterflies. That's pretty amazing.
And Rosemary, people can get all kinds of information if they just go to the website Homegrown National Park.
Mm-hmm.
There's lists of plants to plant. There's all kinds of valuable information and suggestions for what you can do.
I want to go back for 1 minute to the PhD because I'm still afraid that we've scared people on this. June 1st, the Albany County Master Gardeners will have a garden education fair, and you can bring your soil sample right there. They'll tell you if you've done it right or send you back if you haven't, and they're doing free samples right on there. It's there are some requirements. Judith is correct, but it should not stop you. It should not intimidate you at all. You've been listening to Master Gardeners Judith Federle and Barbara Nuffer. We'll be back in a minute with more. Parents' Place is a phenomenal 4-bedroom guest house in Bennington, Vermont. It has a private pool, a spa, a fireplace. It's beautiful surroundings. This is the perfect spot to rent if you have a family reunion coming up, a wedding or other special occasion, or for any company events and retreats. And if you mention that you heard about Karen's Place from On the Brink, you will get a special discount. Go to naturelogs.com, please, to see the work of our talented sponsors, Denise and Scott Stoner. This husband-wife duo writes and shoots amazing things about nature. They have traveled around the country, and sometimes they just look up in the sky and get these amazing subjects: birds, landscapes, eclipse, bugs. Nature Logs offers photos, prints, and note cards. And the Stoners also do slide presentations and lectures. You can find out about them at naturelogs.com, naturelogues.com. So Master Gardeners, and we all three talking to you now, Rosemary Armeo, Judith Federle, and Barbara Nuffer, are Master Gardeners. We're dedicated to helping the public learn more, the community learn more about gardening, and to encourage that. And part of that is we have a hotline. You can Google stuff, sure, but it's always nice to talk to an expert, and you can call and ask any question you want. So because I have two experts here, I'm going to quiz them. I have taken some questions from that have come in, actually, the popular ones and the funny ones that have come into the hotline, and we'll see how they do. You ready? You ready, ladies? Okay.
Ready.
My hydrangea won't bloom. What's wrong, Judith?
Well, we get that question more than any other question in June, around June, because people have gone to the nurseries, they bought these gorgeous hydrangeas, they bring them home. The next year, they don't look anything like what they did when they bought them. And part of the problem is that some hydrangeas bloom on new growth, some hydrangeas bloom on old growth, and many of the popular hybrids have tried to do both. Ones that are like Endless Summer and Pinky Winky, and I don't know what the current cultivars are, but I will just say that in the horticultural trade, Endless Summer has become Endless Bummer. Because so many people have been disappointed in it. And part of the problem is that if you're talking about those plants, now if you're talking about the Annabelles, the arborescens, the hydrangea arborescens, they are native, though the Annabelles are sterile. So if you're interested in a native hydrangea that will serve pollinators, you have to get one that isn't sterile. But that's not that hard to do now. But there are many, many nurseries carrying these native shrubs. Those bloom on new growth. There's no problem. You cut them down in the spring, they come back up, they bloom. They're dandy, they're fine. It's these hybrid ones that are the problem, because in our climate, many times the old stems are not able to produce blooms. It's just too cold. Now, this may be changing. We had a very mild winter this year. I'm going to be very interested to see what my Pinky Winkies do this year. I've kept a couple just because I'm curious to see what happens. I mean, they've been a huge disappointment to me. I'm right there with the tribe. I'd be calling the Master Gardener line too. And what's the matter? But it's because they, the ones that come on new growth are not going to really give you the kind of show that the combination did. And many times the old growth just simply can't make it. So that's one of the problems with the hydrangea.
Oh my God, I'm going to tape this, call it the Pinky Winky lecture, and hit it on replay whenever I get this call now at the garden center.
But I'm sure Barbara's got other things that happen to hydrangeas.
But Barbara, I have another question for you, and here it is. I've been seeing this really weird bug. It's really pretty. It's kind of like red and black, and it has polka dots. What should I do about it? Is it hurting my flowers?
Oh, well, the neat feature of your smartphone is you can take a picture of a plant, a tree, a flower, and even an insect, and push on the bottom. There's a little eye symbol. It will tell you what that insect is.
I did that. It's called the spotted lanternfly.
Oh, do we have those here? I have not seen it.
Are you serious, Rosemary?
Yeah, we've had a couple. It's usually people who have been traveling, and
right.
It's not in Albany. It's not in the Capital District yet, but it's all over New York. So we're getting calls about it.
They can travel on your car too.
Exactly.
I heard, but,
exactly. So what are we telling people about that?
Kill them.
Stomp on them.
Don't bring them in. Don't try to capture them. Immediately dispatch them.
I have
because what's going to happen is they're going to ruin all the vineyards. That's the big worry in the Hudson Valley. And even the orchards, they do such damage. So kill them.
So in this case, do not worry about the insect apocalypse. Kill them. Stomp on them.
Right.
It's really ironic. Judith, a question for you about another weird little animal that we're seeing in Albany. It's sort of like a worm, but you touch it, it just jiggles and wiggles. It's awful. What is that?
That is the Asian jumping worm, and it has changed the face of gardening, because out at the Cornell Cooperative Extension, we used to have a plant sale every year, and people would line up an hour before the plant sale opened, because we had these wonderful plants that people dug up, master gardeners dug up from their garden. They divided their perennials. They were wonderfully sized, wonderfully healthy, obviously climate wise to this climate, because they were grown in this climate, and we sold them for a very reasonable price, and that's how we supported our program. come the Asian jumping worm, we can no longer do that. You do not want to accept plants from anybody at this point. If you don't have the jumping worms, do not accept plants that anybody wants to give you. And you have to be even careful about what you get at nurseries, because even the nurseries can't keep the plants completely out of even the so-called sterile potting material that they use for them. It's very easy to have them brought in on mulch, or wood chips. It's if you don't have them, you're lucky and you're in the minority. These are very nasty creatures. They can be distinguished from the non-native European earthworm because they have a white satellum, that's the band that's kind of close to the head, and it's flat instead of raised. But mostly you can tell them because, as Rosemary said, they do this really kind of disgusting thing. When you touch them, they leap and jump all over. And that's part of the reason why we got the problem with them, because the birds can't hold on to them. So the birds don't eat them. They have no natural predators, and they're in the forest, and they eat fast. They're what I don't know what you want to call them. They're certainly not part of the eat slow movement. And they are turning our forest grounds, our forest floors into coffee grounds. That's what they do. They eat up all the nutrients that are there from the stuff that has fallen from the tree, the duff, we call it, that's in the forest, that adds the food to the trees and the roots. And so they are terrible. And the only thing you can do with those is put them in a plastic bag and put them in the sun.
Solarize them, that's called.
There's no, currently we have no solution to this except solarizing them.
Yeah. Barbara, I'm giving you, this is not fair, but it's the hardest question, and it's one we get so often. I have a brown spot on my lawn. Can you tell me what's wrong and what I can do about it? Nothing's growing.
Oh, did your dog happen to use that as a restroom?
No dogs. We don't have a dog.
Oh boy. Did you happen to set something there for a time that, like
I don't think so. And it just got thin, and then it won't grow now. It's just awful. Can you tell me what that is?
I suggest you put a pretty pot there and put a pretty plant in it.
Let us talk about container growing. There you go. Okay, a couple more. Judith, I discovered I have garter snakes in the garage. What do I do?
You have what?
Garter snakes.
Oh, they're lovely little creatures. Be grateful.
My advice was sell the house and move immediately.
They're wonderful. They're not harmful. I don't know whether they do good things, but they're certainly not harmful. If they're bothering you, there would have to be some reason why they were coming into your garage, because that's their natural habitat. Their natural habitat they're kind of called a garden snake, they're a little garden snake. They like to be in the garden. And so I'm not sure why they're coming into your garage, or whether there is some way you can see where they're coming in and try to stop them from coming in.
Yeah, that's all we
maybe there is a snake repellent feature. If you can Google what might repel a little snake like that and send it back out to where it belongs, you could try to spraying that in your garage. But I would just say, hello, snake, welcome to my world. Please go back out in my garden and do your wonderful stuff.
Just get out of here. Okay, Barbara, I have roses, and they have, I don't know, some sort of, it must be a fungus on it. Is there anything I can spray or a chemical I can put on to stop that?
Well, some people use things like baking soda, but if you're really going to be using some of the fancier roses, you really almost have to apply some sort of chemicals in the beginning of the season to prevent that. And they do require quite a bit of maintenance. Now, unless it's horribly unsightly, it probably really isn't going to hurt the plant. So I personally would just leave it alone.
Okay, that's great. We have run out of time. I could just really go on. I'm going to ask the two of you back later in the season when we're actually growing, when there's seeds and
Great.
plants in the ground. I would love to have you back. You were delightful. This is On the Brink. Thank you for listening. Okay, I want to wrap this great session up with, as is our tradition, a short and heartfelt toast. This is it. To the farmers and growers and nurserymen and beekeepers and the horticulturalists, and to us, backyard gardeners, who are every day beautifying our places and coddling our hurting environment. Thank you.